personal look at one Alberta parent's concerns about Wi-Fi in her child's school. Alberta Primetime's Hema Parmar with the story.
Ryder and Peyton love their walk to school each day, but now their mum Gina is worried about what could await them in the classroom.
I think it is incredibly dangerous for children.
She's one of many concerned parents protesting the installation of wireless internet at George P. Nicholson Elementary School.
We first became aware of the Wi-Fi issues when we saw in the news kids getting sick in Ontario and British Columbia. So that kind of piqued our interest, and we did a little more research into it, and we found that there's a lot of dangers associated with it.
And while a school in Ontario has been the first to ban wireless internet access, the Edmonton Public School Division is not concerned with the level of radio frequency emissions.
The equipment that we use are actually thousands of times below the limit set by Health Canada. So we're really not concerned that with the scientific data there isn't health risks.
120 Edmonton schools have been outfitted with Wi-Fi over the past 5 years, and officials say they have not received any health-related complaints in that time. That, however, is little comfort to this worried mother.
I don't want my children to be in the school being guinea pigs and to find out 10 years later they were irradiated and it's caused some kind of cancer.
So obviously some growing concern here in Alberta over Wi-Fi. Let's start with what Health Canada says. They say based on the wealth of peer-reviewed scientific evidence, Health Canada has determined that exposure to low-level radio frequency energy, such as that from Wi-Fi equipment, is not dangerous to the public and not dangerous to children. Health Canada will take immediate action to revise the guidelines should new convincing scientific evidence arise. So, Magda, the WHO, Health Canada, they say Gina has nothing to worry about, citing more than 20,000 studies that show there is no risk, but clearly not everyone is convinced, you included. So give us a sense why.
Well, interestingly, just recently Health Canada requested a paper that we published that came out a few weeks ago looking at the same frequencies of microwaves in schools, 2.4 gigahertz, and how it affects the heart. So we've been able to demonstrate that immediate reactions include arrhythmia and tachycardia, which means a rapid heart rate, for individuals who are sensitive to this radiation. That was done with adults, and we think children are much more sensitive to this radiation. So some of the things that parents are telling us that are happening to their children, the dizziness, the nausea, the headaches, and the heart palpitations all fit in with a syndrome called electrohypersensitivity, and that's been recognized by the World Health Organization.
And so, Magda, has that study that you're talking about with its impact on adults, has that been peer-reviewed and gone through the sort of stringent oversight that we would expect from a study?
It has. It's been peer-reviewed. It's called a double-blind study, which is the gold standard in science. We've already started to repeat it. We're getting virtually the same results, and there's a scientist at the Karolinska Institute who is also in the process of repeating that study.
Okay, Marc.
So on top of being a medical physicist, I also have, I'm an assistant professor in oncology. The journal in question that Magda published the paper in is called the European Journal of Oncology. That's right, Magda?
That's correct.
So I actually did look at the paper, and there are possible shortcomings in the paper. You said it was a pilot study, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
it was
in fact,
a proof of concept study. We wanted to find out whether or not we could get a reaction by measuring heart rate, and we did.
But you're not the first person to try doing this, are you? There have been about roughly a dozen papers who've tried to actually show some sort of heart rate correlation with Wi-Fi, and you're the first person to show it. Now, and I say that based not just on my own experience, but I actually emailed James Rubin. Do you know who James Rubin is?
I do, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so James Rubin and I have...
Actually, the work that James Rubin did is quite different than what we're doing. He's asking patients whether or not they can identify whether or not they're exposed or not. I'm not looking at that. I'm not looking at any kind of subjective response. We're actually measuring the heart. And the kinds of results we're getting is, within instantly the heart jumps from 65 beats a minute to 120, only when people are blindly exposed. And that's not what James Rubin is doing at all.
No, but
Magda,
he was talking about other studies.
Sorry, give me a sec, Marc. So, Magda, that is based on the level of what we would expect from Wi-Fi, the same sort of level that our kids in schools, for instance, or us perhaps even in the home would experience from Wi-Fi?
Exactly. The study we did was at the same frequency that we use for Wi-Fi, which is 2.4 gigahertz. It's at an intensity that's 0.3% of our current guidelines, 0.3%. And the levels that we experience in schools are actually higher than that. So we're doing a study that shows that there's certainly a viable reason to be concerned.
Okay, Marc.
So my point is, in fact, Dr. Rubin, I'm not talking about studies that he has done, but he has made me aware that there are roughly a dozen studies of heart provocation, this exact kind of study. And this is the first one, according to his email, that has shown any kind of effect. Which seems, it's a little bit of...
It's the first one that's showing a really dramatic effect, that's right.
It seems like, it seems like a bit of an outlier. He also looked at, he did a 2005 review of, again, these are called provocation studies. And he updated that in 2010, this year. And the results seem to be that there is, according to him, no effect. There's no effect to these provocation studies. Well, so it does seem like a bit of an outlier. So scientific consensus seems to be against this.
Okay,
well, scientific consensus is irrelevant. If someone finds a result and if it's repeatable, and we, as I say, we've already started to look
and I
at it.
agree
We're repeating
with you.
it, and we have another.
Right.
But this isn't about my study or our study. This is about whether or not children could react to Wi-Fi. And let me tell you the reasons I think they can. First of all, there's scientists around the world. During the last 10 years, there have been 10 appeals from scientists and medical doctors asking for the international guidelines to be changed, and they have not been changed. These are the ICNIRP guidelines, and Canada follows them. There have been warnings from more than 10 countries asking that children, because they are more sensitive to this radiation, not use cell phones. And cell phones is the closest that we can come to the Wi-Fi studies. We don't have studies on Wi-Fi. There are absolutely no long-term studies looking at the health effects of Wi-Fi on people. The closest we come to is a rat study that I was able to find that looked at the same frequency, 2.4 gigahertz. It wasn't pulsed, which means it's not as harmful. And after long-term, short, low-level exposure, they found an increase in a number of tumors that were statistically significant and an impaired immune system. And that's basically the two things we're most concerned about.
Okay, just got to go to break. So last word, Marc.
Well, I found plenty of studies also that look at rat models and found no effect. Also with RF frequencies, which have been studied, not necessarily Wi-Fi exactly that frequency, but a band of RF frequencies have been studied.
WHO and Health Canada, Marc, are citing...
And the FDA, the Health Protection Bureau in Australia, in the United States, the Health Physics Society in the US, there is a wealth of bodies who say there's nothing to be concerned about. Is it
conclusive in the sense that the studies are being done on exactly what we're talking about?
Studies are being done on enough of the band around that region with the power levels. Yes, they are.
That's the point.
Yes, they are. Now,
okay. We've got to go to break. We'll come back. We'll obviously get more into what science is out there, and certainly we'll hear from Magda in terms of what impact she says this is actually having on our children. Of course, we want to hear from you. Should Wi-Fi be banned from Alberta classrooms? Tell us what you think by following the contact links at albertaprimetime.com. More with our guests after the break.
I'm a teacher and I'm very nervous about what the effects are.
Not at all. I firmly believe that it has no impact, and anything that people make up is pretty psychological.
Everywhere you go, like, Future Shop, Starbucks, they're all Wi-Fi. So I don't think it's as big a deal as people are making it out to be.
You don't know what radiation is going to do to kids. And again, when they're in a growing level, it can have a really profound impact. We don't know yet.
So some thoughts there from Albertans on the health impact of wireless internet connections in the classroom. Marc, Magda, I don't want to go back and forth on this study for the whole time. I think there's a lot of other points that we can cover. Marc, there certainly does seem to be a growing number of parents and of scientists that are concerned about this, where Swiss and German governments are warning schools.
I don't know if it's a growing number of scientists. I still think it's a very small number of scientists.
Okay, enough that it's prompting governments in Europe to warn schools about Wi-Fi. Given that...
What government is warning...
The Swiss and German governments are warning schools about the use of Wi-Fi.
The European Scientific Advisory Council is not warning them. They're saying there's nothing to be worried about.
Okay. We weren't talking about this 5 years ago. We're certainly talking about it in more detail and in more depth now, and there's certainly more parents that we are seeing with this growing concern. So I guess my question to you is, if there are parents that are concerned about it and we're hearing this anecdotal evidence, is there a point at which you say, let's err on the side of caution, let's step back on this and let's do some sort of definitive research that is actually talking about and confirming what we are talking about?
But they are doing definitive research. If you do a literature search, there's lots of research being done which is showing no effect.
Health Canada, a number of school boards, a number
Over
of
20,000 articles.
scientists, and there have been a number of the evidence does look overwhelming. So help folks at home understand why these major global bodies, national bodies, school boards, and this research points in one direction, and you're saying no, that's not the right direction.
Okay, well, let me explain things to you about who makes decisions. When it comes to the school and they're asked about whether or not Wi-Fi should be installed, they go to their health department provincially, and they turn to Health Canada. Health Canada turns to the World Health Organization, and the World Health Organization turns to ICNIRP. So basically, ICNIRP is calling the shots.
Okay, so if they've got it, if they've got it wrong, you're saying that just kind of trickles down across the line.
Exactly, it
Okay.
entirely trickles down because we don't have experts at the provincial level. This isn't a provincial jurisdiction; it's federal. The difference between Wi-Fi in schools and other types of Wi-Fi is they're using industrial strength, so it's not the same strength that we have in our homes. This Wi-Fi is emitting constantly. It's pulsed radiation. And if you go to any of the early literature that comes out from the U.S. military, from Eastern Bloc European countries looking at pulsed radiation, they're all harmful. I received over 6,000 documents from a scientist who worked for the U.S. Navy, over 6,000 documents that are showing adverse biological and health effects of this radiation at levels to which kids are currently exposed.
Marc, is that out there? Is that evidence out there?
I am not aware of that evidence at all. And if it is out there, I'm not sure what the quality of the studies are.
Well, currently I'm in the process of scanning all of these documents and making them publicly available.
That's great.
Magda, in terms of the anecdotal evidence, because that certainly seems, that's where this has really bubbled up, it seems, in Canada. You know, we saw it certainly sort of cluster in Ontario with a number of issues. We've seen an issue in BC with people pointing to this. But we've had schools in Alberta that have had Wi-Fi in there for 8 or 9 years. We haven't heard anyone talk about these types of effects and link it to Wi-Fi in Alberta. So how could it be that this sort of reproducible scientific evidence that you're talking about isn't happening in Alberta, but it's happening in Ontario?
Well, first of all, schools won't allow us to go in there to do any kind of measurements. We've asked. So we don't know what the levels are in the BC schools versus the Ontario schools. Also, not everyone is sensitive to this radiation. We think something like 35% of the population has moderate sensitivity, and not all of them are going to associate it with Wi-Fi. So, you know, if people suddenly have headaches, first thing they think of is not Wi-Fi. That's usually the last thing they think of. They rule out absolutely everything else, and when they can't rule out anything else, they say, what's changed in our environment? And if the only thing that's changed is that they're exposed to microwave radiation, then that becomes a good basis for doing some research.
Okay,
But of course, it's not quite the last thing in their mind anymore. I mean, this is generating a bit of a panic, and there's something called a nocebo effect. It's the opposite of the placebo effect, where you can actually induce, essentially, panic attacks, headaches, nausea in people who become worried about these things happening.
We have to leave it there. We're out of time. But before I go, I mean, what we want to do here today is empower parents to be able to make this decision for themselves. Marc, I'll start with you. If you were to point parents to where they could read up on this and get the information to make their own decision, where would you point them?
Definitely Health Canada and the World Health Organization, which, even though I know Dr. Havas has quoted the World Health Organization in her papers as pointing out that environmental sensitivity or electromagnetic sensitivity is a real thing, they go on to say in the same breath that there is no way, there's no research that links EMF to what is called...
But Health Canada, WHO, you trust there. Okay.
I trust them.
Magda, from your point of view, if parents want to go find out more about this, where do you suggest they go?
I suggest they go to my website. I'm trying to put science into very easy to understand terms, and many of the research papers that I've just referred to are actually on that site.
Okay, so what's that website? And we'll put a link up.
It's magdahavas.com.
Okay.
EMFhealth.com.
Great discussion. That obviously we've just scratched the surface, but I certainly appreciate both of you for coming in.
You're quite welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you,
Thanks,
Magda.
Jefferson.
Okay, thanks.
It's Dr. Marc MacKenzie with the Cross Cancer Institute, also speaks for the Centre for Inquiry Canada. And on the phone, Dr. Magda Havas, an Associate Professor of Environmental and Resource Studies at Peterborough's Trent University.